Due to increased internet censorship, truth is under attack like never before. And the truth about the controlled demolitions of the World Trade Center towers on September 11th is just as important as it ever was. To stay updated on our work, make sure you visit ae911truth.org and subscribe to our email list. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel so you can receive alerts when our videos are posted. No algorithm can silence the facts. By subscribing directly to us, you make it impossible for the censors to stand between you and the information you need to know. Visit ae911truth.org right now and stay connected.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of 9/11 Freefall. I am the host, Andy Steele, and it's been a few weeks since I have talked to you, and a couple of things have gone on in the world of 9/11 truth, in the sense of the articles that we've released, and in the greater world. So I thought it'd be a good time to get some of our best and brightest here at AE 9/11 Truth on the air to catch us up, talk all about it. We call it the Braid AE Bunch. You can credit our first guest here for coming up with that because of the way the boxes look. We just got to get one more person to get that 6-box feel there. But this is Jeff Long coming on. He is the director of marketing for AE 9/11 Truth. In his early life, he was with the Air Force, putting out that propaganda for that patriotic brainwashing campaign that our government is engaged in. He's talked about that on previous episodes. So if you have not checked that out, I recommend that everybody find it and watch it. Now he is responsible for the colorful memes and artwork that you see here at our organization, accompanying our articles. He's working for the good guys. So Jeff, thanks for coming on 9/11 Freefall today and joining this panel. He is joined by Craig McKee, who has been a journalist in Montreal for over 30 years, covering news and entertainment. He's won 8 provincial and national newspaper awards. He writes and edits for us here at AE 9/11 Truth and for his blogs Truth in Shadows and Thought Crimes and Misdemeanors. He also hosts a podcast called Truth in Shadows that everyone here should check out. Craig, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks for having me, Andy. Yeah, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
No, it's great to have you on. And, you know, you've got those 8 provincial and weekly newspaper awards, but for some reason, instead of displaying those proudly, you've got your baseball cap collection there. What is that? The Expos, the Canadians.
I'm trying to fill up the background with, stuff other than my laundry or, my disheveled, bed. So this is the best I could come up with.
I say put those awards up. I want to see them. He's going to be joined, and Jeff are going to be joined by Kamal Obeid, who is a board member and general manager for AE 9/11 Truth, holds a master's degree in civil engineering from the University of California, Berkeley, and he's been a practicing civil and structural engineer in the San Francisco Bay Area since 1980, licensed structural engineer since 85, specializes in structural steel building analysis, as well as investigating structural failures of steel frame buildings. He served as a volunteer for FEMA, investigating earthquake failures, and a longtime member of the SEANC, Association of Northern California. Thanks for coming back on, Kamal.
Thanks for having me.
And we're going to round out the cast today with John Schuler, who is a civil engineer with a Bachelor of Science in Civil Engineering from Lehigh University, Master of Science in Civil Engineering from the University of Alaska Fairbanks. I don't know, what kind of studies do they ever put out? I haven't heard of too many of them in the past 10 years. I'm being facetious, of course. John is a volunteer with Project Due Diligence and very prolific in that work. He was on here a few months ago talking about reaching out to the young people, trying to get them on board instead of talking about pop culture in their YouTube videos. It would be nice if they talked about stuff that was really important, such as 9/11 truth and other matters. So we're going to have a discussion today. Guys, thank you for coming. I don't know, has anything happened in the past couple of weeks? Anything that would be weird if I didn't mention here on the show? I don't know.
There's always weird stuff going on.
Let me tell you.
Yeah.
So I have this thing called Sushi Saturday. I get sushi every Saturday, go to the restaurant. I didn't have the TV on all day. Go down there, and I just casually, to pick up my food, I'm in the restaurant. I casually look up at the TV set, and they're talking about the shooting and the Trump and all of this stuff. And I'm like, what happened to other restaurant goers? Nobody says a word. And I'm reading it. I'm like, did Trump get shot? And then this woman's like, yeah. That's all she said. They're just kind of eating and stuff. Nobody's like reacting. Nobody is kind of gathered around the TV set like you see in movies, like you might remember from JFK getting shot or from 9/11. And I'm just like, this is sort of a big deal. So that's how I got caught up on the news. Of course, I followed it for a period like everybody else. You know, we're a 9/11 show. As an organization, we don't take stances on other controversial things, but as individuals, we all have our thoughts. So just for a few minutes before we get into the mission work, let's share our thoughts here. I know, Craig, you just on your podcast talked about this a little bit. What's your reaction to what transpired in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago?
Well, I think about the effect that 9/11 has had on how people in general receive news like this and what they immediately think. You know, I remember when 9/11 happened, I kind of was reacted like most of the world did, I guess. Although I did think the buildings looked weird the way they came down, but I hadn't quite figured things out. But thanks to 9/11 and thanks to years of trying to examine that issue with everybody on the panel, I now am, like a lot of other people, very quick to question things that happen and very quick to suspect or to at least wonder if we've been told the whole truth. So I think there's the reaction that a lot of people have had to this shooting. I think it owes, I don't know if you'd call it a debt, but it certainly can be traced back to the education that we've all got from 9/11. You have once again, you have the mainstream media essentially doing nothing and just focusing on the election, and it's citizen investigators, most of them on YouTube, I guess now, who are looking at the evidence, who are examining the cell phone video. And it just seems like every day new information comes to light that's quite revealing. And of course, very little of it is being reported by the mainstream media, but it's, the focus in the media and in Congress seems to be completely on the failure, in quotes, of the security, and not on whether anything about this is more questionable than that. And I certainly think there's much reason to suspect that this is not just a failure of security, because for it to have been a failure, it's such a catastrophic failure that it to me it strains credulity. And I can give you some details about what I mean by that, but that's sort of my initial thought anyway.
Well, again, you just did a podcast outlining some things that you find wanky about it. So I recommend everybody find Craig's podcast over at Thought Crimes and Misdemeanors and watch that video. My initial thoughts when they were talking about this slightly slanted roof and it was too dangerous to put Secret Service agents on there is, look, when I was 18, I took a job with my mom's boyfriend at the time. And the roof was much slantier and much higher in the air, and I was carrying shingles on my shoulder up a ladder like that. And nobody seemed all that concerned about me doing that, except me maybe. But apparently there's an issue with the guys who are whose job it is to take a bullet for their for the president. putting them up there. I don't know a lot about this. I've got my hands full with 9/11, but I think that we should look at every aspect of each event that happens, because we have learned, and I'm going to be playing some things later in the show, that nothing that happens is always as they tell us. Most of the time, it's not as they tell us. There's a lot of cover up. And even if it's CYA for the powers that be, even if it's that innocent, which most of the time it's not, but even if it is, we need to know that. And this is how you make our government work better. Any other thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'll just say that what I've picked up over the last few days is there have been some really interesting cell phone video that surfaced. One of which was somebody who was very close to the building where the alleged shooter was supposed to have been. And he's watching what's going on with law enforcement going around that building, and there were all kinds of cops to the right of the building as you're looking from where Trump was, and there are people there pointing. Law enforcement actually knew about this guy. They knew he was suspicious and he was lurking around, and he had a viewfinder, not a viewfinder. What, I forget the name, the thing that the name of the equipment, but they didn't see a gun at that point. But he was being talked about by law enforcement almost an hour and 3/4 before the shots actually happened. So it's unbelievable, and there doesn't seem to be any communication between the other agencies that were there and the Secret Service. And I'll add just one last thing. There is that there's one gentleman named Chris Martinson who's done an analysis of this whole thing. He's been putting out videos every day on a YouTube channel called Peak Prosperity. Quite interesting. And he has shown, by looking at the audio and analyzing the audio, that there are two distinctly different sounds from the shots that are all supposed to have come from the alleged shooter. So three shots that sound one way, and then 5 follow-up shots that sound very different. And then you have 1 or possibly 2 from the sniper team. So the suspicion that he's putting forward is that there were actually 2 shooters. So that would be the end of the lone gunman theory, if that was the case.
Well, I recommend everybody check out Craig's podcast to get an even more in-depth analysis on this. Here's the thing. We're not a partisan show. I'm not saying Trump good, Trump bad. We're not talking about making America or any nation on planet Earth better again or great again, whatever it is. We're just looking at an event. But even if you believe that Secret Service just made all of these mistakes, right, and you compound that with the fact that our federal government, our courts have ruled that the federal government doesn't have to be scientifically accurate when it issues reports from federal agencies. Should we be relying on the federal government to interpret truth for us? Because again, they try to dismiss people like Craig, like me, like anybody who is hanging a shingle on the internet, analyzing these things. But at the same time, every time you look at the government and what they put out, they're even defending their right to not be accurate when they try to give us their interpretation of the truth. And in this case, with the Secret Service, look, even if it was, let's just be generous. Let's just say they got filled with hubris. Nothing like this had really happened in 40 years. It seems like it was yesterday when you hear about Reagan and all that, but really 40 years has passed. Even if they got filled with hubris and overconfident, the fact that what they're saying, they're just digging themselves into a deeper hole and making themselves look worse. So the federal government is not really the best source for trying to dig up the truth behind anything, even if you believe the official story. Does anyone else have any thoughts on my comment just there?
Well, I think it's an interesting. I mean, it's a strange yet very interesting scenario that we've got in front of us here, because in this case particularly, you've got. I'm not a fan of Trump by any stretch. In fact, I don't know if I like the guy at all. But anyway, the point that I'm trying to make is that it's interesting because you've got a certain power center there that is built by Trump that is questioning the deep state, and that group has a lot of power behind them to basically push for an unbiased investigation, for a third-party investigation of some sort to basically look at this thing. So it's going to be, as opposed to 9/11, where all the powers to be were aligned to basically create the narrative. Now we're looking at something that could clearly have the deep state involved, and then on one side, and then you've got the other side, which is questioning the deep state. So, we'll see how it plays out. It could actually be, as strange as it is, it could be something that could change things. We hope. I mean,
as the system turns on itself over the partisan politics stuff,
right,
starts outing each other. And I'm going to play a clip later, and I've got this sort of strategically timed that shows that false flags are real. They happen, and it's not always the parties that you think are innocent and good that talk about them. So let's get to that. I have a clip that we put out from Candace Owens, conservative pundit, and every time we do this, from somebody in this on one side or the other of this polarized political debate that's constantly going on, the other side gets mad at us, says we're getting in bed with this person, and we shouldn't be publicizing that they said this about 9/11, even if it's positive towards our mission. Of course, I don't agree with that, but we highlighted this, and I'm just going to play a short excerpt because she talked at length about this, but let's show that right now.
Nope, I refuse to believe that, and you should not either. You are telling me that somebody hijacked a plane, got onto the plane, crashed the plane exploded into fire, tower collapsed. They could not even find all of the human remains. But in all of this, in all of the fire, in the collapse of the building, and all of the dust, in all of the struggle, they found, and didn't give any details of how or who found it, a passport. The little paper passport survived everything. And they go, oh, well, look, this is one of the hijackers. This is one of the Saudi hijackers. He must have dropped his passport from the sky before he flew the plane into the building, and somehow they couldn't even find the audio boxes, the black boxes from the plane. But they have the passport. So here it is. Yeah, nope, not going for that. Then, of course, there are those who believe that 9/11 was an inside job, a false flag event. And those people are deemed the craziest because how dare they? How dare they question that narrative? How dare you think that your government could be involved in a false flag attack at all? Well, let me tell you something, sweetheart. You don't have to believe that 9/11 was an inside job, but you better tether yourself to the understanding that false flag events are a reality. Not an imagination, not a conspiracy theory. It is a reality. And you want to know how we know that? Well, you can just look this up on Wikipedia if you don't believe me, because a former sitting president who was subsequently assassinated in the back of a car next to his wife, JFK, he refused to sign off on a false flag event. The CIA came to him. This is called Operation Northwoods. You should look this up if you think that I'm making this up.
And she goes on and describes what that is. Of course, for newcomers to this issue, Operation Northwoods, it was revealed that this was a plan to stage false flag attacks, I believe, in Miami, and use this as a pretext for attacking Cuba. But this would involve blowing up planes and such, killing civilians. It got its way to JFK's desk. He nixed the idea. Some people speculated that this is what caused him to meet his end. I believe there might have been other things, but regardless, it shows that false flag attacks are not out of scope for our government. Jeff, you're the one who brought this to our attention, as you typically do when stuff about 9/11 is being talked about in the world. What is your reaction to yet another person just like Tucker Carlson, just like Jimmy Dore, just like so many others, another person with something to lose, with their name and face out there and very prominent, speaking about the stuff that we have been talking about for so long.
Well, what I find interesting is that it's taken this long, over 2 decades for the people that some like Tucker, for any of us that have been around this movement, the 9/11 movement, and researching this since the beginning, and how much he was against it, and the way that he made fun of 9/11 researchers, and for him to come to the conclusion that he was wrong, and discussing publicly, mentioning it several times, how wrong he was, and part of the system, and that he I think for like most of them, over the past several years, I think with everything that has happened with any kind of government overreach, and what we went through with COVID and the lockdowns, and any kind of authoritarian push by the government, and everything that's been going on since the elections in 2015, 2016. I think a lot of people have finally realized, as we all have, how corrupt the government is, and that they lie about everything. If they're in front of a podium discussing anything, they're lying, or they're covering up something. There is no reason why they would come out and say anything unless they're pushed for it. It's kind of like watching Cheadle during the her grilling in front of Congress about her failures as the Secret Service director. And I found it interesting that the one thing that she said that nobody questioned her about is when she brought in and made mention of continuity of government. Nobody grilling her on the panel. They just skipped right over that. And there was no reason for her to bring that up. And of course, the whole time watching her, the way that she was reacting, all of her body language just told me that she's got a golden parachute, and she's protected, and she's just there to take these hits until she had to move on to whatever the next phase is. But these people coming out, celebrities talking about it now, it's interesting that they realize that they don't feel any repercussions at this point with everything that's gone on, that they can publicly push this out here the way that we would discuss it years back, and the kind of hit pieces that would come out. Look what Popular Mechanics did in the beginning. The dogs that they would just they would attack and just leave nothing left behind, and try to destroy people's lives over it. But now we've got these celebrities who obviously feel. Like even when Jimmy Dore was talking about it, I remember on one of the shows, he said as early as 2007 he was looking into this. So I think we have a lot more people like this that have been researching it, that understand how bad it is. But I think that they can see the corollaries now with what's going on currently, that it's not getting better. There is this massive push. It seems like the shadow government, the people that manage the deep state. Of course, there's an airplane overhead. Sorry about that. But the way that they have these guys running out there and running cover for all of this, it seems like they're scrambling at this point, like they're just kind of throwing everything out there, throwing everything on the table. Anything that they had as far as an operation going, they're just like throwing everything towards the wind to see what's going to stick, as if they see something bigger coming. And we've got war on the horizon. I'm watching Pentagon reports today discussing how we only have like 3 to maybe 4 weeks of ammunition to fight in a war before we're out, because we've given everything to Ukraine. We've borrowed stuff back from South Korea that we gave them. We got these multiple fronts. It's just such a weird time, and even with friends of mine who are on the left and the right, You know, I don't believe in any of these savior types, but that they don't realize that we literally had them trying to take out both Biden and Trump at the same time. I think it was 2 days prior to the attempted assassination on Trump. They froze Biden's financial assets for campaigning, like $90 million worth. So they tried to take him out at that point, and then Trump 2 days later. It's like they're after all these guys, and you know they're trying to keep all of us fighting with each other. This left-right paradigm, this Hatfield-McCoy kind of internal strife, because they want us at each other's throats so bad. They need civil war so they can bring on what they have next, so that while we're busy, then they can do these other things behind the scenes. So it's not going to get better anytime soon. But you know, after that, you know, if we can break through some of this stuff, and hopefully some of these people, seeing how corrupt government is, once we get to the point of trying to get these people on board with our Scientific Integrity Act, that they can actually see the validity of it at this point now. If anything, what happened on the 13th with the shooting of Trump, that they can see the cover up, that the science, that they're not going to use it when it benefits us, just them. So I think that we're in good favor that way when it comes to at least that part of the act.
Yeah, well, speaking of, you know, people speaking out, it's so strange to see people talking about things that the movement was talking about back in 2006. For instance, Operation Northwoods. I mean, that was part of Loose Change, and we're all just sort of like know what Operation Northwoods is. That's why I feel so confident in cutting Candace off right when she's about to explain it. Because this audience knows what that is. But then you tune into a show like this, and, you know, we're a little off topic today, but most of the time we have detailed analysis of factoids related to the engineering of these buildings and specific engineering arguments that are made. So we're so way beyond what the mainstream media, even if they try to play catch up, you know, where they stand right now, and just trying to introduce this to the American public. And it's like they should have been listening to us to begin with. We should have had a new investigation 10 years ago, so we wouldn't have to be playing catch up and explaining to people what Operation Northwoods actually is. But some people don't think that false flags are real. The concept of their government attacking their own people, or at least lying about a major event, is just so far off for them. And I also noticed, too, because she talks about Kennedy, and she infers, oh, he didn't go along with Operation Northwoods, and then he was assassinated not too long afterwards. And we tend to lionize people in our history as if we're in the Lion King film or something. And the older King Lion was killed, and now we're avenging it. But I don't look at the world like that. I don't see good and bad. I see that the United States government just has a way of doing business, and people justify different things to themselves. I thought about this today after I watched Candace Owens. I'm going to play a clip here. This is from a PBS show documentary about the Cuban Missile Crisis. I'm not even going to tell you what's in it, but this is kind of pertinent, especially since we've been talking about RFK a lot lately. So this is just going to be about a minute and a half.
The decision made to get the missiles out of Cuba, the ex-com then faced the question, what action should the U.S. take? The first option considered was an all-out invasion of Cuba. Remembering the Bay of Pigs disaster, Robert Kennedy agreed that limited military action would be a serious mistake.
We're going to have to think Russian ships, and we're going to have to think Russian submarines. Now, whether it wouldn't be the argument, if you're going to get into it at all, whether we should just get into it and get it over with and say that...
Robert Kennedy then suggested that the U.S. create a pretext for an invasion by staging an action against the U.S. base in Cuba at Guantanamo Bay, or by sinking a U.S. ship, as was done in 1898 when the U.S. entered the Spanish-American War.
Way we can get involved in this through Guantanamo Bay or something, or whether there's some ship that, sink the Maine again or something.
I think Bobby Kennedy, in my presence, kept reflecting the view that this was the watershed crisis of the Kennedy administration, a time of truth, chance to redeem himself from clearly what had been mistakes in the Bay of Pigs, but that it was essential that he do so in a way that would leave his brother to go down in history as a hero and a moral leader for the United States.
So yeah, no big deal. RFK suggested a false flag to get us going in our war with Russia during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and they just move on as if that's not some kind of breathtaking revelation. Let's get some reactions to that.
Yeah, Andy, it's you watch something like that, and it kind of seems like you're watching a group of fifth grade boys. Really, it's so embarrassing, almost on one level. And then you can just see that what the government's been up to for so long. And I agree with what everybody said on this panel so far tonight. It's one big set of lies is what we're propagandized to all our lives. Just think that we're the good guys about everything, and whatever power of suggestion the media shows you is true. And as soon as you scratch the surface, all you have to do is put your thinking cap on for just a minute and just scratch the surface of any of these stories. And you don't even have to go that deeply before things just don't start to make sense. And it's a shame that people don't have more, I don't know, or less fear of just thinking and speaking out and wanting to know the truth of things. But it just gets to the point. It's just embarrassing that these lies and these sort of like adolescent boy dreams of trying to one up each other are just what's going on in the government all the time. I mean, I'll leave it at that.
Well, I'd like to chime in there. I had not heard that clip before. That's quite interesting because a couple of the things that Kennedy was suggesting there actually were part of Operation Northwoods. So I always had the impression that the Joint Chiefs of Staff, they actually presented that to Kennedy, and they were unanimous in their support for the plan. And I always just took for granted that Kennedy had the common sense to say, like, no, we're not doing that. I didn't realize his brother was urging him to do something very similar. That's pretty interesting. But I think that's much more the norm than most people realize. And I want to say just a thing about the Candace Owens thing before we get too far from that. One thing I find interesting, I read an article years ago, and I can't remember what it was exactly, but the point being made in that article was that the deep state doesn't mind certain things becoming known as long as enough time passes, right? So the fact that that Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson and people like that are talking about 9/11 now, I mean, it's a little earlier than I might have, that you might think would happen, but it's like they think as long as we get 25, 30, 35 years away from the event, then it no longer matters because it's like people are on to the next thing. And they'll kind of, it's like with Kennedy, people are not that, it's not that hard to imagine that the CIA was involved in the Kennedy assassination for a lot of people, but it sort of becomes so distant that people just like, oh, well, that's back in history. And I think the powers that be would kind of like the same thing to happen with 9/11. And I think that's why the onus is on us. I mean, it's great that we've done all the research and we've got all the evidence, but we've got to do a sales job too, and we've got to wake people up. And I think we really need to jump on stuff like this. People that are willing to start asking these questions, we got to say, ask those questions and be there pushing that, because that's a gift for us. I think the fact that some reasonably famous people are opening the door to this, and that's just the first kind of step to a wider acceptance of this. So I think it's quite encouraging, actually, that this is happening.
Well, one of the One thing, the fact that, I mean, because we were saying earlier, it's like whenever the government's speaking, you know that they're lying. And I find it so strange the other day that just out of the blue, the CIA comes out in 2 articles, Gizmodo, I think it was, and the other one I can't remember, saying, no, the shooter, we had nothing to do with any kind of MK Ultra with this kid, not at all. It just kind of like, nobody asked you. It's like, why are you even saying this? It's just, it's so weird. You know, I mean, the only thing that was missing from the shooting that day and the stuff that came out after that, I was waiting to hear some audio from somebody just asking, is this real world or exercise? You know, it's just so weird what is going on right now.
It is. And, you know, the thing is I wanted to start off the show, especially with the RFK clip, because I don't think most people have heard that. I basically just found that because I'm genuinely interested in the Cuban Missile Crisis as a historical event. And that came up and I almost fell out of my chair. This was a couple of years ago. But basically, you know, I want us to get established that the government lies about major events, that false flags are a reality, as Candace Owens says, that a lot of people are questioning 9/11. And right there you have a person who is considered a hero amongst a lot of people in our movement proposing a false flag during the Cuban Missile Crisis, a very volatile time in our history. So this is kind of how government does business. And the reason I want to get this established is in case you have a newcomer to this movement watching this show, who is going to look at what we're going to get into next. You know, it's not a question of whether a government would try to deceive the public with a major event. They do this. The question we have been asking, and I think we've answered pretty thoroughly and provided enough evidence for, is did they do this on 9/11? And the evidence clearly shows, if you go to AE911truth.org, watch our films and watch other 9/11 free falls, we have made that case that these buildings were brought down in controlled demolitions. Now we're going to get into something that we're not certain of yet. An issue that has been lingering over AE for a number of years. We've been observing this, and I'm ready at this point to just throw it out to our supporters and get their opinion on this. And that's why we have 2 engineers on the show today to look at this and give their thoughts. Does this qualify as evidence? What is it that we are actually looking at here? There was a video that was released earlier. It was on July 23rd. It was very clear HD videos of the Twin Towers coming down. And some in the 9/11 Truth movement had said that they see flashes coming off of the Twin Towers. I have my opinion, which I'm going to share, but we may differ from each other here, and that's good. That's what I want. I want the discussion, because I could be way off as well. But let me just go ahead, and then we're going to get into Building 7, and I got a story behind that too. But before we get to Building 7 flashes, let's watch the Twin Towers. Now, you guys should be able to hear me over this video, and you can see that they're burning. And that is the South Tower about to go down. And, okay, so there is a flash towards the bottom, and I don't have these circled like I do with Building 7. But it's very difficult to see. And my opinion, I'm not the engineer, but when I see that, those particular flashes look to me like glass, like the sunlight reflecting off of glass and metal. That's my opinion. Somebody tell me that I'm right or that I'm wrong, or you don't know yourself.
Well, I would say I don't know. I would say I couldn't really see anything. I couldn't see.
We're going to play it again while you
was.
talk. Let's take a look. Now, it's difficult to pinpoint because we haven't taken the time to circle these. But, I mean, I can, like, when some people said that they saw flashes, I can sort of see what they're saying, because there's one towards the bottom, and there was one sort of in the collapse area. But that, to me, looks like the reflection of glass, which, of course, you're going to expect to see. There was a lot of glass in those buildings. It's going to be flung outwards. sunlight's reflecting off of it, and it's from the flashes that I saw, unless they're referencing something else, are far away from the building. I mean, not super far away, but are being ejected from the building. So it makes more sense to me that it's glass. Opinion, I want to hear it.
Well, I would say, Andy, that I agree with you. And I'm not one of the experts on the panel, but just like you, I mean, just looking at it, the reason I would say that it looks like a reflection of light is that there are quite a few. If you look in the bottom as it's coming down, you can see a lot of little sort of flashes, or they're not, it looks like pieces falling that are being reflected, that are reflecting light of some kind. It's not just a few large ones, but as you go down, if you look in the smoke, you can see them. They continue to happen, and some of them are not as bright, but they do look like some like a chunk of some material that's hitting the light, or light's hitting it.
John, are you seeing these flashes at all? Yes or no? And what do you think it could be?
Yeah, I do see what you're talking about when the building comes down, and also what Craig was talking about, the continuous flashes. So like Kamal said, I don't know what they are. I can't tell, but I don't, if this just came out, I don't know what the importance of this is as far as the flashes, but I do think, well, we know for a fact that there were continuous explosions at floors beneath the, where the planes hit, in order to let these towers fall the way they did, because otherwise it would have been impossible. So I don't know what these are, but to say that they were explosives going off is not a far-fetched conclusion. I mean, it's a completely logical conclusion, or whatever else is going on in the smoke. So I don't know whether it's whatever it is, but it wouldn't change our engineering evidence one way or another.
Right. Well, that's the assertion. Now, there was an article that I saw out on InfoWars that kind of jumped to that conclusion. But I don't, in this particular case with this particular piece of quote evidence, I am just not seeing it. And believe me, I would love to see an explosive charge going off, but that is not what it's showing. But here's what this did, is it jotted my memory, because for years, and let me just tell everybody this odyssey that I've gone through with this thing. Flashback to 2006, 2007-ish. I guess it'd be in 2008 when I saw this. I'm watching a video of Building 7 coming down, and I see a flash go off on the building. Now, in this particular thing, and someone will say, oh, what's the difference between that and the Twin Towers? Well, in this particular thing, you're not seeing all the details that you're seeing with the Twin Towers, with all the debris shooting out from the building. This flash is very clear as the building comes down. And I saw that. I created a little YouTube video with my little YouTube channel at the time, put that out there. I had some people saying, oh, that's nothing, you shouldn't even have this up. Now, that could have been a government disinformation campaign for all I know. But back then, I was all into the camaraderie and unity of the movement, and I kind of listened and backed down. But then in 2009, I brought it to the leadership of AE's attention with the flashes, along with another video highlighting the flashes. I was told that looks like explosive flashes to me, and then nothing happened, and I didn't really have any power to do anything about it at that time. I come to work for AE. My first month, somebody calls the office, and he says, I was watching a video, and I saw a very bright flash go off on a video of Building 7 going down. He showed me the video. It was a different angle from the ones I had seen, so I noted that. So what I did is I compounded them into this, what I call a study video. And I just kind of look at this over the years. It's not enough for us to come out and say that this is definitely explosives, but it's interesting enough to me. And so when this whole issue about the new video of the Twin Towers came up and people are saying they're flashes, I thought, you know what? I've done as much as I can do personally with this research on this flashes issue. Let's just throw it out to the supporters and see what they think. Hence sort of the point of today's show. So I'm going to be playing some videos. These are not done for entertainment value. These are done for simply pointing out where these flashes are. We can talk over them. But this was the video that initially caught my attention back in the 2008-2009 period. And you're going to see right here. So the building is about to come down. We're waiting. This is the famous Dan Rather clip. And let's see, right there, it went off. Now I'm going to circle it in just a moment. And as I made these videos, I made them slower and slower so that we can catch them. Right there, it goes off. Again, it's going to go off. I'm going to circle it at some point. All right, here we go. That's where the flash comes off, right there, right off of that building, right in that area. Okay, and that should make it easier for people to catch it. All right, so I circle it again right there. Now we're going like super slow, like molasses. Boom. All right, we're almost to the end of this. But when I make a point, folks, I make a point. I will play this over and over again at super slow motion. I don't screw around when it comes to 9/11 truth. So anyway, let's get a reaction to that from one of our engineers, Kamal or John. What are you thinking when you see that video?
Well, again, it's really hard to tell what this is. It's conceivable that it could be an explosive charge. But the thing is, and you know, I guess in I'm not a demolition expert, okay? So I you know, there's an art to control demolition and putting the charges in a sequence such that the entire structure just basically crumbles completely into its footprint and doesn't, you know, just doesn't kind of stay in one piece in any part of it. And so, you know, it is possible, although there's no way I can say that this is my opinion for sure, that this could be part of the sequence of basically disintegrating the whole building. The building started to come down first and the charges have occurred at the bottom, but then at some point, in order for the whole thing to basically fall apart, you need to have charges up at the upper levels. Well,
John, what are your thoughts?
It's hard to say.
Yeah, it's hard to say. I agree. I don't know where all the charges might have been. You know, our stance definitely, we know that this was brought down by controlled demolition, and I believe the UAF report concluded that for that building to fall the way it did, 8 floors were taken out entirely, all the columns, somewhere below the 16th floor. So that was going off first to allow that to fall the way it did, and whatever other ancillary charges were in there, of course, to make it fall into a heap of rubble is what happened. But they made it. You know, the perpetrators made a lot of mistakes that day. So if a stray charge went off, that would just be one more mistake they made. So, but I can't really tell what that is. But again, it would add to our engineering evidence to see a flash. Not seeing them or not knowing what it is, I don't think detracts at all from the evidence that we've built up over the years.
Well, let's take a look at another. Oh, sorry, but let's take a look at another angle of it. This is what the guy who contacted the AE office pointed out. Now, this is going to be very hard to see for our audience. That's why I did this meticulous work of trying to draw people's attention to it. And it's going to go very slow. I think it's going to get circled at one moment. Oh, I just saw. Oh, no, there it is. I think I just caught another one right there. A flash going off right there. So I don't know. It's kind of interesting. Now, is that the same angle, or is that the same side of the building as the previous one? And then there seems to be a flash going off above it. But folks, this is exactly why we have not released this yet, because the confusion and just the confusion that you're hearing in my voice right now is kind of where we have been at with this. And you certainly don't want to overlook evidence and be arrogant and dismiss things, but you also don't want to put out misinformation either. So that is why this is kind of sat on my Dropbox cloud for a long time, and we haven't talked about it until this week because the issue came up. So you see them being put out there. We're not going to belabor it, but does anybody have any thoughts after seeing that video?
Well, the one thing I want to bring up is that what's nice is that we got two different angles, straight on and then from the side, showing that same light refraction, charge, whatever it was, coming from the same area. And it's also in the shadow. So we know it's not a reflection because the sun is on the opposite side of it. So it's definitely something coming from there. And like we were saying earlier, that some people are saying that it could be electrical charges from the building as lines are going to be cut. But we also have to remember too that there's that guy in construction gear playing, whether he's a real construction guy or not, or an asset, coming across in that video saying that everybody's got to move back because this building behind is going to be coming down in a few minutes. So I would think that they would have cut power at that point, so we wouldn't have those kinds of electrical charges going off. But also on the other video from what Kai had put out, or what he caught, the sun, the way it's hitting that side. So when you see it come down, what people are jumping to the conclusion of, they could be some errant charges, stuff going off that we're seeing. But at the same time, it's my computer just locked up there for a second. But what we're seeing is that kind of like what Craig was saying earlier, you could see reflection. Obviously, glass and metal pieces down below are catching the light. You can see in the explosion at the top and all the debris that's been blown up that way, glass and more metal parts, that it just looks like glitter going off all over the place. So it's that we know it wouldn't be up there in the cloud where the building is gone at that point. So could be, but I just think people are just rushing. A few people I've seen on Twitter and some other channels just rushing to judgment that those are definitely some charges, which I could see why they would want that to be the case. But from what we're seeing, we can't really see anything other than that. But the one thing that I did notice in that video, as it's coming down and zoomed in, you can definitely see parts that look like plumes from some actual cutter charges. There on the edge of the building, we've got the traditional ejecta coming out there from whatever explosions are at that point, that you could see it on all the other different sides of the buildings. So I don't see anybody else talking about that really.
Well, let me just go to this, because there was a comment left when we released this video to the public. It says, is it possible that those flashes have something to do with the electrical system? And that was one of my thoughts, is that, okay, if you have power in this building, there could be some machinery, a printer, something that explodes as the building is coming down, and that just happened to be near the window, and that's why we see it. So the question then would be, was there power in Building 7? Now, I just want to ask the engineers or anybody who is in the know, would an electrical unit, like some piece of machinery, if there was no power being supplied to it, would it explode in that manner if the building was coming down on it at that moment?
Yeah, I don't know. I can say, with the recent Baltimore bridge collapse, apparently that's what we saw there when that bridge was collapsing. There were those electric lines over it sparking up, and that's what we saw. That looked like explosions on that too. So I guess anything's possible, and whether there was power or not in the building, who knows? Anything's possible, I guess.
I want to get to that because I've been researching this for a number of years. So I want to know that question because, look, I will admit I am not a mechanical engineer. I can't tell you what would happen if this thing was crushed by a floor, like this, a car or a printer or whatever. But obviously, if there's juice in a machine, there's more likelihood that it's going to explode and create a bright flash. And so, that's an important question to answer of whether there was power. Now, I actually found this. This was an investigation by the 9/11 Commission. You can see it right there. Interview of Consolidated Edison Company of New York officials. And you can see all the participants written there on the cover page of this memo. But here's this interesting part of it right here. And so I've highlighted the paragraph. It says, however, at 4:15 p.m., Con Ed employee Fred Sims had spoken to the fire department and told Con Ed headquarters that they thought WTC 7 would collapse. The fire department asked Con Ed to shut down the power to WTC 7, which they did. This cut off power to Park Place, Battery Park, City, and Cortland. They were able to shut this down remotely from the West End Avenue. Con Ed decided, however, to leave the transmission line open to service Fulton Street because they were not in position or not positive the building would fall, and it was servicing Beekman Hospital, which they thought may have been needed to care for casualties. When Building 7 finally did collapse at 5:20, it severed cables and collapsed the other two substations. So from this reading, I would think that the power was cut off from World Trade Center 7, which, again, I'm not an expert on this, but it shows, if that's the case, that there's no juice going into the building, which means there wouldn't be any electricity going into any machinery units within it too. Here we go. It's going to play a bunch of times. Our audience isn't going to see anything in that big chaotic mess of building coming down. I just saw it right there. It's going to be highlighted for you. What's interesting about this, so you have like this one flash towards the side here that's going to be circled that goes off, but there also seems to be a flash above the building that happens that I think I'm going to be pointing out in just a moment. Hold on. Right. Man, I was meticulous with this. Right. Okay. No, that's the same one. Hold on. There we go. There it is. Right there. Right above the building, which I think we see in the other clip as well. So this
That's
could
what I was
be.
gonna say, Andy. I wonder if that's the same flash that we saw from the other angle.
Well, there you go. And see, the problem is like, okay, the Twin Towers video is so detailed because it's HD. So it's easier to say, well, it's so detailed that you're seeing light reflecting off of the glass. But, you know, this was the video quality that I had to work with at the time. And the fact that these flashes are appearing in this low quality video means that they're very bright. And they're also appearing in and amidst all this dust, powder from the building demolitions taking place, but it is kind of offsetting to see it above the building as well, which is why would an explosive be happening above the building as it's going down? This is about to play out. We're going to appear on the screen again in just a moment, but does anybody have any thoughts about anything I just shared?
Well, I would just say it you know, I would be interested to look at a couple of examples of regular demolitions just to see if light flashes like that are you know, part of those scenarios, or whether they're only accompanied by very loud explosions, which kind of just makes you wonder if there isn't something, if it's anything at all, whether, you know, it could be thermite, but it just makes you wonder that anyway. I don't know, but
I think we have to look at the big picture here. Basically, in order to bring the building down the way they did, what did happen is they have to put charges on every one of the columns on multiple stories. So I mean, we're just looking at one little flash in one place, which is way up at the top of the building. And to me personally, as a structural engineer, it's meaningless. So I think we need to understand the type of explosive that they used or the type of chemicals that they used and how they behave. Because I mean, this is a global failure of the building, and there were global charges placed everywhere. So why are we only seeing one little tiny flash at the very top? It doesn't really help us.
Well, the only way that, I mean, something like that would probably be one that didn't go off on time or delayed. We also have to remember too that watching, you know, the sports stadiums being imploded on Discovery Channel are by far and away low level compared to the scale and the technology that they would have used on 9/11 just to make sure that this went off as well as it did. I mean, we wouldn't be here today discussing all of these things had the entire operation went off perfectly. There just wouldn't be a 9/11 research movement. But we're able to pick apart the pieces because of the puzzle areas where they failed. And we see that, I mean, because there are humans involved in all this stuff, that technology never works exactly the way that we plan on it. So they would have had to have used things that we're not even really truly aware of at this point. And remember, you know, they're 20 to 50 years ahead of time with whatever it is that they're using. And now here we are 2 decades past, and who only knows what we're using today compared to then. I mean, it reminds me back the Cold War, one of the spy satellites that we used that I was using, that the way they explained it, I mean, you could have this one was more based on radar, and you could have as long as there's about a 2-inch gap, like the doors on a hangar open on a Soviet airfield or somewhere in East Germany, the satellite could beam into it, bounce its radar off of it, and it would come back up to the satellite, and it would paint a 3D picture of what was on the inside of that hangar, just that 2-inch door. And this is back in 87, 88. So we're just dealing with old grainy footage, trying to figure out. It's like, we know that controlled demolition was an aspect of it. NIST, no way are they even going to look at that, because they must have known, because that's why they didn't even really discuss it. The commission report definitely did not. So we're just kind of playing catch up and dealing with these tiny little fragments of what we get, so that we can actually try to figure this thing out. And luckily, hopefully there'll be more people that come out with some found footage like that, or hopefully this jars people going, you know, maybe there's something I got in a box somewhere stored because I was there that day, or hopefully somebody around building 7 and 5 and 6 and the rest of them just catching some other stuff on the street. It would be nice at this point.
Absolutely. So our final analysis on this is we have no clue. We are still looking at it, but I would love to hear the audience's thoughts. So if you have any, leave them in the comment section of this show today, or write them into AE 911 Truth. But it's out there for other people to study and do with as they will, and we certainly will keep track of it. Guys, thank you for coming together today and talking about this, and talking about the importance of this work that we are doing to keep this issue alive and in the hearts and the minds of our supporters and the public, so we can get justice for those people who died that day. But thanks for coming on 9/11 Free Fall today.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
Andy.
Hit that notification bell and slam the like button and subscribe. Thanks.